This is Radio 1.
Mother says there'll be no work next year. Qualifications once the golden rule, and now just pieces of paper. Just because you're better than me doesn't mean I'm lazy. Just because you're going forwards doesn't mean I'm going backwards. Trousers and your old school shoes. The truth is, son, it's a buyer's market. They can afford to pick and choose. Just because you're better than me doesn't mean I'm lazy. Just because I dress like this doesn't mean I'm a communist. Factories are closing and the army's full. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I've come to see in the land of the free there's only a future for the chosen few. Just because you're better than me doesn't mean I'm lazy. Just because you're going forwards doesn't mean I'm going backwards. You're on top of the scrap heap. At 16 you were top of your class. All they taught you at school was how to be a good worker. The system has failed, you don't fail yourself. Just because you're better than me doesn't mean
I want to dedicate that to John Peel. It's Billy Bragg with To Have and To Have Not.
Doesn't mean I'm going.
John, you are truly missed. I'll be back with The Rock Show at 1 o'clock. But coming up next, it's a special John Peel tribute with Steve Lamacq. After the news at 11 o'clock with Helen Neal.
The music industry pays tribute to John Peel.
BBC Radio 1 Newsbeat.
John Peel, the longest-serving DJ at Radio 1, has died. He was on a working holiday in Peru with his wife Sheila when he had a heart attack in their hotel. They had 4 children. John was with Radio 1 since the beginning in 1967. Controller Andy Parfitt told us more about what happened.
It's very hard to get John to take any sort of holiday away from the station, but he had gone on holiday and he'd gone somewhere that he'd always wanted to go with Sheila. He died of a massive heart attack in the hotel. No one could do anything for him. Sheila is out there, with him and making arrangements to come back to the UK.
He was one of Britain's most celebrated broadcasters, presenting on Radio 4 as well as Radio 1. In 1998, he was awarded an OBE. Tony Blair has called him a unique voice.
He's someone who will not just be deeply missed, but I think we're all aware of the fact he was a genuine one-off and a very warm and decent human being too.
Tributes from bands and artists have been flooding into Radio 1. Many of them credit him with inspiring them with his radio show and in some cases launching their careers. John said that Teenage Kicks by the Undertones was his favourite record. Here's their lead singer, Fergal Sharkey.
I owe everything in my life to John Peel, as do the Undertones. Certainly at the time, there was no one else who was going to do what John did. And that was play our record on the radio.
And you can leave your own tributes to John Peel on Radio 1 online.
1 Newsbeat.
A quick look at some other news. A week since she was kidnapped in Iraq, the husband of British hostage Margaret Hassan has made a new appeal for her release. The aid worker has British and Iraqi citizenship and has lived in Iraq for decades. The House of Lords has rejected MPs' plans for a total ban on hunting with dogs. It's voted for hunts in England and Wales to continue with licences. And West Brom have sacked their manager Gary Megson. It was just hours after he told the board he didn't plan to stay on beyond the end of the season. Radio 1 Newsbeat, there's more later.
At 10 o'clock. o'clock for years of our teenage lives. If you were of a certain age, you remember this theme tune meant only one thing. The man who stood for the maverick, the misunderstood, the often much maligned, was about to lead us through another 2 hours of implausibly eclectic new music. He would excite and baffle us at different turns, but this slightly understated but redoubtable bloke would bundle through a pile of records that we simply wouldn't hear anywhere else on the radio. Over the years, he championed the sort of bands who in turn would change people's lives, and he influenced 1 million record collections. And today we lost him, and we're still struggling to come to terms with that, as I'm sure a lot of you are. The definitive anti-hero DJ, a giant of a man. Tonight we dedicate this programme to John's family, but tonight on Radio 1 for the next 2 hours we'll feature session tracks all booked by the genius John Peel. And to start, to borrow a phrase from John's old book of tricks, we'll begin with The Mighty Fall. It's The Fall in session from one of their many John Peel sessions. That's Rebellious Jukebox from 1978. In fact, all tonight's selections will be John Peel session tracks, and if you'd like to request a track, do drop us an email. In fact, if you'd like to share any stories, any of your favourite John Peel stories with us, we'd love to hear from you. Whether you met the man or not, or whether he just changed the whole direction of your musical taste, drop us a line either via the website bbc.co.uk/Radio1, or we will use John's email, which is john.peel@bbc.co.uk, because we are here tonight. I must admit there are a lot of people in this building who are still in a state of shock, as I imagine a lot of you are. But tonight we do want to celebrate the great man, and I'm sure there is a part of Peely that would be absolutely appalled by all this attention being paid to him, but at the same time I think there's probably a part of him that would be secretly really very touched. So email us, we'll take those from you, we'll read some out as we go through the next 2 hours. As I say, we'll be playing some songs which John championed from all sorts of different eras and different genres, and some of his big favourites which we've managed to get out of the archive this afternoon, including this from Culture.
What a shame, what a shame. Some have never seen it like that. So if you bring back the money with the sign of the lion money. Lion dollars we want to see. So if you take back the money with the sign of the dragon money.
I can see John Peel jigging around to that, and he could jig, actually, could John. We started the programme with the Falls Rebellious Jukebox for, amongst other people, Michael Johnson and also Paul Gowers, and a bunch of emails came in during the afternoon asking for something from Culture in session. Richard Davis wanted Lion Rock from Culture, Nigel Stapley, and this from Jim Cole, who says, can we have something from Culture, which I believe was John's favourite session ever. I think John had about 10 favourite ever sessions, but it certainly was one of them. It was Lion Rock in session for the Peel Show, and that was by Culture. And this comes from a set which Orbital played for the Peel programme. In fact, their last ever performance at Maida Vale back in July. This is Orbital, and this is a version of Chime. One of many dance acts championed by the John Peel programme over the years, Orbital and a version of Chime, which was their last ever live performance at the Maida Vale Studios in North London for the BBC back in July. Thank you for your text messages and your emails. We'll try and fit in as many as we can before 1 o'clock. This one from Paul, who says, could you please play some Cocktail Twins? If you can't fit in all your session tracks tonight, we will continue the theme across the week, so send us your request. But Paul says, can you play the Cocktail Twins, Pearly Dewdrops? Because John once told me that he cried when he first heard it, and I cried today when I heard of John's death. I only met John once on a train to Ipswich. Did he get in the buffet car, Paul? Because he was always very good. The one thing about John Peel, you could have always got around in. That's what we like to think about. We've got fantastic emails coming in. This one from Sarah in Bournemouth, who says, this is uncanny. I grew up with all these sounds. Remind us of times, places, people. John brought so much to my life. Thank you very much, Radio 1. And this, I can't find a name to this one, but this is typical of what John has done, during his time. I mean, this, I think, was a lesson to us all. And when we looked at John, when we all bowled up here as young whippersnappers, John was so conscientious, and this just, I think, sums it up. It just says, John took the time for many years to come to the annual Rock Open at Scunthorpe Baths Hall for any new bands who wished to enter. And I bet he sat through every bloody set as well, didn't he? Thank you very much. It's 81199 if you're texting in, or john.peel@bbc.co.uk. And we do want to reflect as well, not just the bigger bands who John broke into the mainstream, but also some of the slightly more left of centre acts which John's played over the years. And this, I think, is the perfect team up. This is something which is recorded at Peel Acres. We know this was one of John's favourites. It's a live track from Laura Cantrell and Ball Boy together doing this, which is called I Lost You, But I Found Country Music.
I lost you, but I found country music. I found country music to hold me and soothe me the way you used to do.
And I miss you, but luckily there's music. Luckily there's music
to get me through. I think of you every day of my life, and every day I miss you and wonder and guess what you are listening to.
Every day I miss you and wonder and guess what you are listening to. What you are listening to. What you are listening to.
Little Miss Wildfire.
Damo, who's in Bury, and also for Steve Greenwood in Burnley, who suggested we play some Jimi Hendrix tonight. And that was indeed Jimi Hendrix, Little Miss Lover, a session which was recorded not at the world-famous Maida Vale Studios, but as John always used to point out, if you come up to Broadcasting House from Oxford Street, you'll see on your left quite a posh hotel. We won't name it, but the actual session was recorded in a room in that hotel, as John never failed to mention as we passed by. Before Jimi Hendrix, Little Miss Lover, it was Laura Cantrell and Ball Boy, and I Lost You But I Found Country Music. And we've got a cover version coming up next from the Delgados, and this, as you probably know if you're a regular John Peel listener, John always liked bands to think a little bit out of the box when they came in to do sessions, and cover versions always entertained. I remember, in fact, I think this is probably during the early 80s when I tuned into John an awful amount under the bedclothes, and there was a point where he used to make every band who came in do a cover version of Heaven 17's We Don't Need This Fascist Groove thing. So for week after week after week, there were different versions of We Don't Need This Fascist Groove thing. None as good as the original, I don't think, but it was a great trick which John used to play. But obviously in years years afterwards, he had bands coming in to do cover versions and sessions and things, and this one of the best, and this one of his own favourites from the Delgados. This is their version of Mr. Blue Sky.
Everybody smiles at you. Bum, ba, ba.
the original, but I bet you love that. It's the Delgados in session, their version of the Electric Light Orchestra's Mr. Blue Sky. And you can contact us tonight with your favourite memories of John Peel and maybe how Peely changed your life, or maybe your own record collection. It's 81199 if you're texting. If not, john.peel@bbc.co.uk. Or we've had one or two messages left on the message board as well, bbc.co.uk/Radio 1. This one, which is anonymous, but I think sums up a lot of what's we all feel ourselves, actually. People who've worked with him, who started us up, as youngsters listening to his programme. It says, John Peel's radio show was far more than a radio show. It was a place to go where every person who listened felt welcomed into a fairer, warmer world, one in which anybody who felt they had something musical to say could say it and be heard. Well, will we find another person like him? Mark says, John's radio show spanned my entire lifetime. It was the only show where you could hear everything from world music to acid techno. That's true. And Lucy says, I had the honour of meeting Sir John of Peel at the final ever Orbital concert. We played a track from that just a second ago. Almost exactly 3 months ago. It was the best night of my life, their best show ever. Also, thank you to Will Jackman, who says, now a 41-year-old Liverpool fan, teenage years in the sticks, Peel was my musical revolution. I think I betrayed him by trying to become an accountant. P.S. My first ever gig was the Undertones at Leicester Centre, and he also says, P.S. he'd be chuffed to know Liverpool won tonight, Liverpool 3, Millwall 0. He used to sit in here watching the TV some nights as Liverpool were in action in Europe, cursing when they played badly. But, Will, you're right. He would be very chuffed to know that they actually won 3-0 tonight. And Graham, who emailed in earlier, wanting some Damned. This is another John Peel session track from the Damned, who Peely championed, of course, early doors. This is I'm So Bored.
Oh, you so bored?
No idea how John would have come out of that when he originally put that session out, but I'm sure it would have been something like, there's a waggish bunch for you. It's The Damned from one of their sessions, and we're going to follow it now with possibly the most requested track we've had all day today. And I'll just run through a few of the people who wanted to hear this track. And it is, we've listened to one or two of the session tracks while we were trying to put together tonight's show just before going on air. And this is a glorious version of a Joy Division track for Chris in Loughborough. Also Ralph John Withers wanted this, Neil Turner, and Howard Jones. Not me, Howard Jones, I suspect. Aidan Campbell for John English, and also Paul McGarry, and Scott, who's in Indiana, and Dave Crompton, and all the other many people who wanted to hear this. A fantastic version of Love Will Tear Us Apart. So it's all session tracks tonight, as you've probably spotted if you have just tuned in. We are celebrating the life of John Peel tonight and the enormous back catalogue of session tracks by bands he books over the years for the BBC. That from Joy Division, a version of Love Will Tear Us Apart. And I'm sure somewhere John is looking down smiling at us. We had loads of requests to play a track which is called We Love John Peel by Bisc. Kim in Colchester and Bagpuss John in Liverpool both wanted to hear this Bisc track, and we put it in the machine and it's stuck, and now we need an engineer to come and fix this machine. And as I say, I'm sure somewhere someone is looking down smiling at us. Instead, this is Nirvana.
When we play, the way
much bootlegged as their star was in the Ascendant. It's from Nirvana, in session for the John Peel programme, requested by Mark B. That was Son of a Gun. And some more of your text messages, and some very nice ones here. Celia in Exeter says, I did my homework to John Peel's Perfumed Garden. I met him in a flat in 1968. Seems he's been there musically all my life. Still listening at 54. I met John once, says Dave. I was at work. In fact, I was only showing him out of the building. I ended up talking to him for over an hour about football and music. He was the nicest guy I ever met, and that's typical Peely. And Kate from Liverpool says, I sat next to Peely at Anfield last year. He told me to go out and buy this particular track, which would change my life. He changed my life. Irreplaceable. Kate in Liverpool. And while we're actually on Merseyside, something else which John would appreciate. This is Half Man, Half Biscuit. Talking to Louise, who is John's producer, who said John was always fond of a bit of a yodel, and that guy he actually tracked down when he was on holiday in New Zealand and had sold 78 records by Ronnie Ronald, but finally, when he went on to New Zealand, and it took a lot to get John on a flight for a start, but John, having been a fan for years and years and years, finds Ronnie Ronald, persuades him to do a session, and that was a track from the Ronnie Ronald session for the John Peel programme called Mocking, Kill, Yodel. And before that, for a whole bunch of people who wanted to hear something by Half Man, Half Biscuit, because it reminded them of John, and I just don't have time to get through all the names, but Casper Davis is one, Chris Chris without an H, actually. Matt Long and also Leslie all wanted to hear Trumpton Riots, which we played you from one of the many Half Man, Half Biscuit sessions for the John Peel programme. This next, and this is one of the bands that you think, well, John does certain groups, and you don't imagine him always having been influential in bands who crossed over to the mainstream. Obviously, we just played you Nirvana, and some of the bands from the 70s were probably more predominant in going on to have hits. But do you remember John Peel having this band in session? This is Smashing Pumpkins. So many different generations of John Peel listeners tuned in tonight, and we welcome you all. It is a celebration of John Peel's life and the music he championed tonight. Listen to this. This is an anonymous text, but this came in from somebody who's just said, The Stranglers in 1977, when I was just 11 years old, listening under the bedclothes. I'll really miss him. And so many people, I think, over the years have done that thing, and I don't think it was just... we always imagine, I think, people of a certain generation, that it was just us with our little transistor transistor radios, which had one little earpiece. We'd go to bed, we'd pull the covers over our head, we'd turn the lights out, Mum and Dad couldn't hear us, and we'd be listening to Peel. And then you obviously got into the problem where, well, what are we going to do when we want to tape the sessions? Because you had those old Gesso blasters where the stop button made that terrible cracking noise when you were trying to stop the tape player. But still you do it because it was worth the risk, because you wanted to go in the next day at school and say, I heard this on John Peel last night, and only I have got this tape, and I have it for years and years. I'm sure many people listening have still got cassettes of John Peel programmes. But obviously it's not just the 70s. This one from David in Stockport says, Peel kept me sane during the 80s and introduced me to some great new bands. Any More Fall or Captain Beefheart would be a joy tonight. We'll see what we can do. And Steve Owen Bradford says, and this is coming back up through the 90s and into the noughties, says, Peel had such a profound effect on my life, playing the Smashing Pumpkins and Pavement and Beefheart. Always an inspiration. Well, that was the Smashing Pumpkins for you from a John Peel session, a track which is called Girl Named Sandus. And this is something else. Again, another band which you may not associate with John Peel, but just proving that Peel ran the gamut of musical genres. This is the Sisters of Mercy. This is Sisters of Mercy in session for the John Peel programme, that a version of Alice. And I realise as well as, the humble listeners like you and me, we have a lot of bands listening tonight, and a lot of groups obviously got their first exposure on the John Peel programme. We've had many emails and text messages tonight, of which this is a fair example, I think. This is James, who says, as a kid, my only ambition was to have one of my songs played on the Peel show. He played everything we sent him. Thank you very much, John. That's James, who's in Strawberry Story. And this one from Stephen Hartley, who says, me and my mate were inspired by the punk records played by John. Along with two other school friends, we started our own band. John played our first single, which launched us, and we then went on to do 3 other singles and an album, all of which topped the indie charts. Since that time, I've never stopped listening to John, and I've never stopped playing in punk bands. There are a lot of groups I know who, as I say, are listening tonight, who are indebted to John for his support of the underdog, really. I guess this is probably one of the most famous.
Yeah. I was quite nervous before. I wondered why I was nervous when I was walking up here, because, you all seem quite nice people. Obviously, you're not going to attack us or something like that. And it's not a really massive place where you've got to be really scared about projecting to the back row. But maybe it was because without the person who we're all here to see, we wouldn't exist. So if you don't like us, maybe it will make us not exist after, I don't know. So maybe that's why I'm nervous. But anyway, we're going to attempt to play a cover version, which we're not very good at usually, but I seem to remember when I used to listen to this, to John Peel's programme as a child, soon to become a man, that he really likes his song. I hope he does. I hope he likes his version of it. Rich, do it.
It's Pulp recorded at the John Peel 40th anniversary bash, and there's a fantastic tribute. If you go to the Radio 1 website, there's a lot of bands who've Peely's championed over the years who've left messages in tribute to John, including one from Jarvis Cocker from Pulp, who says of listening to Peely's programmes, the monologues that invariably followed each song were often as entertaining as the tracks themselves, brackets, sometimes more so. In a world that is becoming ever more homogenised and pre-programmed, John Peel stuck up for the sore thumbs of the music scene. Go to bbc.co.uk/Radio 1. If you are just tuning in, it is just past midnight on Radio 1. I'm Steve Lamacq with a special show tonight paying tribute to John Peel, who tragically died of a heart attack in the past 24 hours. Our thoughts, of course, are with his family. We are trying tonight to reflect some of the fantastic music which Peely has championed on Radio 1 during his career here. We're playing session tracks for the next hour. If you have any suggestions of things you'd like to hear, do email us or send us your stories or just your memories of John Peel in any form whatsoever, whether it's a time you met Peely. I remember the first time I ever saw him live in the flesh. I was too scared to go up to him. He was standing at the back of an Extreme Noise Terror gig at the Ipswich Caribbean Club on a chair with an old-fashioned video camera, and despite the fact that I listened to him for years and years, I just couldn't bring myself to actually go up and talk to him. But we'll take all your stories, because tonight it's all really about you, the listeners, and I say celebrating the life of John Peel and the massive influence he's had on the music industry. Right from obviously his early days, and we will play some faces in the next hour and one or two things which some of you will remember from days of yore, right up to, the last couple of years when he took to all sorts of strange bands from all over the globe. This one will introduce themselves.
Hello, we are Melt Banana from Tokyo, Japan.
For amongst other people, Graham Verrill, who wants to hear that, is The Faces in session for John Peel. Stay with me. And older listeners may remember John appearing on Top of the Pops with The Faces playing mandolin, or as he later confessed to us, pretending to play mandolin. Paley was actually miming the mandolin when he was on Top of the Pops with The Faces. I'd love to see that footage again if somebody could dig that out. Thank you for all your texts and emails tonight. Lydia says, my favourite memory, listening to John in bed, in secret, in darkness when I was 12 years old. I heard U2, Joshua Tree, and had to write up the details in white eyeliner on the side of my stereo. I knew someone who used to listen to John Peel in the bath, and to remember all the track titles, used to get out of the bath and write the track details in the steam on the mirror in the bathroom. This one from, this has got no name on it, but I think sums up what a lot of people have probably found with John over the years, the amount of music which he's brought into our lives. This message just says, John introduced me to the Butthole Surfers, Attila the Stockbroker, Napalm Death, the Pixies, Sugar Cubes, and leaves me addicted to Gabba and all things hardcore. R.I.P. the angel, John Peel. And finally, for now, this one from Rich, who says, Steve, Rich from Rotator Records here, on behalf of all the little labels who got their first play on John Peel, can I just say, respect. Cheers, John, we'll miss you. This, in fact, is a track by somebody who was championed by John when she was on a tiny little label. In fact, John first played her records when she was on a small independent label called the Too Pure Records, or as we used to know them in the industry, Too Poor Records. It was such a tiny outfit, but this singer went on to become a friend of the family. This is PJ Harvey.
Tie yourself to me. No one else, no, you're not rid of me. Yeah, you're not rid of me. Night and day I breathe. Ha, ha, hey, hey, you're not rid of me. Yeah, you're not rid of me. Yeah, you're not rid of me. Yeah, you're not rid of me. I beg you, my darling, don't leave me. I'm hurting. Lick my legs and I'm on fire. Lick my legs and I'm desire. Tie your legs and keep you against my chest. Oh, you're not rid of me. Yeah, you're not rid of me. I'll make you lick my injuries. I'm going to twist your head up, say, till you say, don't you wish you never, never met her, don't you wish you never, never met her, don't you wish you never, never met her, don't you wish you never, never met her. I beg you, my darling, don't leave me. I'm hurting, big lonely, above everything, above every day. I'm hurting. Lick my legs and I'm on fire. Lick my legs and I'm desire. Lick my legs and I'm on fire. Lick my legs and I'm desire. You're not rid of me. Yeah, you're not rid of me. I'll make you lick my injuries. I'm gonna twist your head off, say, till you say, don't you wish you never met her, 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 don't you wish you never met her. Lick my legs and I'm on fire. Lick my legs and I'm desire. Lick my legs and I'm on fire. Lick my legs and I'm desire.
Y teimlad sy'n gyrru pobl I anghofio amser. Y teimlad sy'n gyrru ti feddwl nad yw'r dyfodol mor fler. Y teimlad sydd yn dod ac yn sbardun o gobaith. Ti'n gweld y tywod llwch ond ti'n gweld fod yna flodau.
championed by John Peel. In fact, he was a fervent supporter of Welsh language bands for the last, well, more than a decade actually. But Super Furry Animals in session for the Peel programme, that was The Feeling. And before that, PJ Harvey, Rid of Me. Kerry in Aberdeen says, when I was growing up, my dad taped the Festive 50 every year. He's kept every tape. It was always part of our family Christmas and will be greatly missed. This one from Pete, who says, I'm 23 years old and still taping the show on an old chunky Ghetto Blaster. It's a very sad day today. This one, I can't find a name on this, but this is, well, I think probably typical of one or two people's experiences of how they got into John in the first place. It's a text message that just says, my brother got me into John Peel by playing it through my wall for as long as I can remember. Recently, John got me through many a night revising for my GCSEs. And this one just says, me and my mate Tony are both in shock. We decided to meet up and have a glass of red wine in honour of John this afternoon. And that's what we did, actually. The staff of the John Peel programme, including Louise and Hermite and various other people. There's a whole bunch, I have to say, of Radio 1 DJs and backroom staff who've stayed on for tonight's programme. And we should probably do this. We haven't done this properly as a team. So everyone in the live lounge, Colin Murray, Edith, Marianne Hobbs, everyone who's here and on the Peel programme. And if you're listening at home, just grab a glass and just for a second, just reflect on the great man. And I offer you a toast. I'm trying to hold it desperately together here, but Louise, Hermite, to John Peel, ladies and gentlemen, for getting us into music like this.
Some
should mention some other Radio 1 DJs who are either listening or are here. Rob DeBank, who's supposed to be sitting in for John tonight. Joe Wiley, who's listening at home. So many of us who probably wouldn't be anywhere near a radio studio if it hadn't been for John Peel. And discovering music like that. And I remember actually hearing that for the first time on radio, tuning into John, and reading about this band in a magazine called Sounds, which is now sadly defunct. I'm thinking they sound really good, and then you switch on your radio, and ever dependable, John Peel has them in session ahead of the game as always. It's the Smiths, and that's one of these session tracks which we're playing you tonight. It's all session tracks until 1 o'clock in tribute to John. We're also taking your emails and your text messages. This one doesn't have a name on, but I think it's a good story. It just says, Louise, the producer, who's standing behind me at this moment in time, says, Louise, the producer, couldn't help but see how excited myself and my friend Adrian were, and took us to meet the great man, John Peel. As John had described so many times happening to him upon meeting his heroes, I became starstruck and can only say, meeting you is a dream come true. To which John replied, with genuine humility, I think you need to get yourself some bigger and better dreams. Colin Robinson says, thanks so much for this tribute show. It's just what I needed today. And Ian and Sharon say, Peely, what I think was so great about him was simply he was himself, warts, gallstones and all. Ian told me a story of Peely auctioning his gallstone as a student gig, which he was at. Is that a true story? Is that one of the many John Peel apocryphal stories? It's a true story. I really wish he'd finished his book, you know. He also remembers running out to buy his first record after hearing it on the John Peel programme. It was Althea and Donna, Uptown Top Ranking, which Peel played about a year later, became a huge hit, didn't it? That's true. This is another session track which we've dug out, and bear with us if we're not playing all your favourites tonight. That's partly because obviously we've been putting this programme together over the last 3 or 4 hours, and we will try and play some of your favourite Peel moments over the next 2 or 3 nights, but this one I'm sure you'll approve of.
Of a bell time where you head on, baby, can't go wrong. Take a bright star and place it on your forehead, say a few spells and baby, there you go. Take a black cat and sit it on your shoulder, and in the morning you know you know. Wear a tall hat in a tattooed gown, ride a white swan like the people of a belting. Where your head on, baby, can't go wrong.
Peter Gabriel, please come to gate 9. Sting has saved the rainforest and things are fine. Call your limousine and go back home. Your children need an angel on the telephone. You're always checking in and checking out. The real world's inside your heart, just let it out.
We've had enough world music for a little while. And all the business suits walk by. They say plasticine video guy. And the world's not right, but it's right enough for you to do some loving stuff to your darling wife by the fireside. And British Airways girls, they sigh, saying there goes that Phil Collins guy. And if you stay at home tonight, the world won't go right overnight. There'll be songs left to write tomorrow. And don't you just love the sights of the little cars with the orange lights, the moving walkways and the baggage reclaims? Don't you wish that you could stay? Don't you wish that you could say you never thought of Kate Bush in a dirty way? And all the business suits walk by. They say plasticine video guy. And the world's not right, but it's right enough for you to do some loving stuff with your darling wife by the fireside. And the British Airways girls, they sigh, saying there goes that Phil Collins guy. And if you stay at home tonight, the world won't go right overnight. There'll be songs left to write tomorrow. There'll be songs left to write tomorrow.
I'm sure Darren and the boys from Hefner are probably listening tonight. That is Hefner in session. Well, it was Hefner as they were turning into the French in session for Peely. Again, bands who did numerous Peel sessions. That's called Gabrielle in the Airport, or Gabriel in the Airport, actually, I should say. Before that, T-Rex and Ryder White Swan. David Essex says, I know it's not what John was best known for, but among his many special powers was surely he was the only bloke able to get Italian minimalist hard house onto the BBC World Service. That's true. Helen in Norwich says, my favourite Peelism was from a Nico Case session when he said, if God played an instrument, it would be a steel guitar. I'll miss him greatly. And Adam and Ellie say, what a loss to the world. He opened our ears and eyes to so many types of music we'd never heard before. Thanks to John, we now love techno, and we've made some of the best friends ever. Chunky, Devil Master and Monkey Child, The King is Dead, Long Live the King. And this is a text message from Phil who says, can you play a tune at the wrong speed in tribute to John tonight? We did have another text message that said, suggesting we should have a minute's silence for John, but John would play it at the wrong speed. He was genuinely mortified when he got these things wrong. And I know he became known for playing records occasionally at the wrong speed and occasionally making the odd cock up, as we all do. But he did really used to get quite upset, didn't he, Louise? I mean, he actually wanted to be a very, very professional DJ, but having said that, we all liked it when he did that.
Try to laugh about it, cover it all up with lies. I try to laugh about it, hiding the tears in my eyes. 'Cause boys don't cry. Boys don't cry. I will break down at your feet and beg forgiveness, plead with you. Try to laugh about it, hiding the tears in my eyes. 'Cause boys don't cry. Boys don't cry. I will tell you that I loved you if I thought that it would change. But I know that it's no use, that you've already gone away. Misjudged your limit, pushed you too far, took you for granted, thought that you needed me more. I would do most anything to get you back by my side, but I just keep on laughing, hiding the tears in my eyes. 'Cause boys don't cry.
Cure in session, and that's a version of Boys Don't Cry. And as I mentioned, we put a link on the Radio 1 website earlier on today and asked for your suggestions of session tracks which you'd like us to try and pull out of the Peel archive. Several people wanted to hear this, including Giles Woodrow, Philip Nicholson, and Mike. No second name, but for all you people, Mike, I'm sure you know which Mike you are. This is Syd Barrett, and this is Gigolo Aunt.
With the Saturn on trail, seems to be all around in tin and lead pale we pale. Driving on down to the beach to see the blue and the grey. Everything's all on its rosy, it's a beautiful day. Will you please keep on the track? 'Cause I want you back, 'cause I know that you see that you're the gigolo aunt, you're the gigolo aunt. 'Cause I know what you are the gigolo aunt, you're the gigolo aunt. gigolo want. I know that you see the gigolo want, gigolo moving on down in a trench coat with the Saturn on trail. Seems to be all around in tin and lead pale, we pale. Driving on down to the beach to see the blue and the grey. Everything's all on its rosy, it's a beautiful day. Will you please keep on the track? 'Cause I almost want you back. 'Cause I know that you see the jokes, I know that you are the gigolo want, sugar gigolo want. 'Cause I know that you see that you're the gigolo want, sugar gigolo want.
Sid Barrett in session and the track Gigolo Aunts, much requested on the texts and emails. We are here for another 15 minutes if you'd like to pass on your tribute to John Peel. It's bbc.co.uk/Radio 1 or text us 81199. There's no name on this, but this is another good story. You can probably tell I'm being well up slightly here, but this just says, for a while I lived in a shed at the bottom of my folks' garden in the sticks in Suffolk. John kept me company and kept me dancing in that damp little room. John would have loved that as well, because John always used to champion bands and loved people from his local area, obviously living out in the sort of Stowmarket region. Anywhere around Suffolk and Norfolk, John was a champion of those bands. But this one is really touching, I think. Just says, my dad worked as an engineer on one of John Peel's radio shows, and as a thank you, he gave my dad tickets to see T-Rex so he could woo my mum. They're still together. This is Mellis.
My head is banging just for my bed. Paracetamol's not kicked in yet, but I still need to introduce you.
Place to go and tell
Smikey says, like losing an old mate I never met, but I won't be sad. I'll have a beer and play records all night in tribute to John Peel. Smikey, that's a great idea. I think that's what a lot of us are going to be trying to do. Gavin from the band Camera Obscura says, just wanted to email and say how sad we all are about John. He's been a huge inspiration to us, and we're proud that he's been such a supporter of what we do. It's been a real privilege to play live for John in the past couple of years and record sessions for him. And finally, that track we'll dedicate to DM, who said, I never crossed my mind that one day I wouldn't be able to tune into John Peel. Can we hear some Mellis? Mellis is, your regular listeners will know, I'm sure many of you have heard John, champion Mellis over years and through various record releases. And again, a band not particularly fashionable, but a group which John obviously felt a tremendous affinity for, a genuine passion for, and that from one of their many sessions, Mellis, Casino El Camino. This is from Billy Bragg.
I was 21 years when I wrote this song. I'm 22 now, but I won't be for long. People ask me when will you grow up to be a man, but the girls I loved at school are already pushing plans. I loved you then as I love you still. Though I put you on a bed, still they put you on the pill. I don't feel bad about letting you go, I just feel sad about letting you know. I don't want to change the world, I'm not looking for a New England, just looking for another girl. I don't want to change the world, I'm not looking for a New England, just looking for another girl. I love the words you wrote to me, but that was bloody yesterday. I can't survive on what you send every time you need a friend. I saw 2 shooting stars last night, I wished on them, they were only satellites who want to wish on space hardware. I wish you cared. I don't want to change the world, I'm not looking for a New England, just looking for another girl. I don't want to change the world, I'm not looking for a New England, just looking for another girl. Looking for another girl, looking for another girl, looking for another girl. I'm going down to the place tonight to see if I can get a taste tonight. A taste of something warm and sweet that shivers your bones and rises to your heat. And I'm going down to the place tonight, the damp and hungry place tonight. Shoot all the stars shine in the sky, they can't outshine with sparkling eyes. And it's so tough to be the one to touch and tease and to do all for fun. And it's too much for a sweetheart to take, but hearts are the easiest thing you could bring. And I talk to the filth and I want to adore. I need deep in myself and I want to get more of that stuff, of that stuff. Some candy talking, some candy talking,
So we've been trying to fit in tonight some of the tracks which we think John would have picked himself for one of his best of programmes. Billy Bragg, of course, In Session and New England. Then the G's and Mary Chain, Some Candy Talking. And this, Blink, and You'll Miss It. John Peel was particularly proud. I've been told this story on one or two occasions, but when he did one of the Meltdown shows, he managed to get this band playing in the foyer, which must have been a tremendous experience. A group who, as I mentioned earlier on, I watched him watch at the Ipswich Caribbean Centre one night. It's Extreme Noise Terror, False Prophet, In Session for the John Peel programme. And that's virtually it from us. Thank you very much for your emails tonight. Tomorrow, Marianne Hobbs will be here from 11 till 1. I'll be back on Thursday. If you'd like to leave your tribute to John Peel, please post a message at the Radio 1 message boards, bbc.co.uk/Radio 1, or drop us a line via the email, or you can text in as well. As I say, Marianne here tomorrow night. Just like to thank everyone who helped put tonight's programme together, and of course to all the engineers down at our Maida Vale studios who've worked on all these Peel sessions over the years. We will raise a glass to the man who touched so many of our lives, both musically and inspirationally, and to the bands as well who he champions. Of course, we couldn't finish the 2 hours without playing at least one track from this band. These are the Undertones.
As they trudged wearily through the sifting snow, their hands plunged deeply into their pockets, they both wished, oh, how they wished, they could be sitting snugly by the open hearth, watching the fire crackling merrily, sipping their steaming mugs of scalding hot cocoa. "Never mind, Judy," said Beatrice incoherently. "It'll soon be summer." Maggie, what's incoherently mean?
For John Peel, 1939 to 2004. Stay tuned, Mike Davis has The Rock Show after the latest news on Radio 1 with Helen Neal.
The music industry pays tribute to John Peel.
BBC Radio 1 Newsbeat.
Some of the UK's most influential recording artists have been paying tribute to Radio 1 DJ John Peel, who's died of a heart attack. He was on holiday in Peru with his wife Sheila. John was with Radio 1 since the beginning in 1967. Here's Damon Albarn.
I've always been a massive fan of John Peel. I think I was of that generation that put their little transistor radios under their duvets and listened to him late at night. He was always sanity but other areas of entertainment seem to be losing the plot.
Many artists credit him with inspiring them with his radio show and in some cases launching their careers. John said that Teenage Kicks by the Undertones was his favourite record. Here's the lead singer, Fergal Sharkey.
I owe everything in my life to John Peel, as do the Undertones. As certainly at the time, there was no one else who was going to do what John did, and that was play our record on the radio.
He was one of Britain's most celebrated broadcasters, presenting on Radio 4 as well as Radio 1. In 1998, he was awarded an OBE. Tony Blair has called him unique.
He's someone who will not just be deeply missed, but I think we're all aware of the fact he was a genuine one-off and a very warm and decent human being too.
And you can leave your own tributes to John Peel on Radio 1 online.